Welcome, everyone. On behalf of our faculty director, Professor Tariq Masood, thank you for joining today's event with the Middle East Initiative at Harvard Kennedy School. We are delighted to be hosting this conversation between James Snyder, MEI Senior Fellow, Chairman of the Jerusalem Foundation, and Director Emeritus of the Israel Museum, and contemporary artist Zoya Cherkassky. Before I hand the event over to James, please be aware that this event is being recorded. However, all attendees, including journalists, are prohibited from recording or distributing the event program in any capacity without prior written authorization. Time permitting, we will take a few questions from the audience at the end. If you would like to ask a question, please send your question to me, Mary Fulham, using the chat function. James?
Mary, thank you. Of course, I want to welcome all of you today. This is the last in our series for the 2021 year. All of this year has been on Zoom. And actually, I want to start by saying that I'm simply grateful to all of the participants and viewers who have tolerated Zoom in order to be with us throughout the year. And as you all know, those of you who've been following us, this has been a year of looking at the Middle East from the perspective of many different cultural platforms and interpreting the region from the many perspectives of each of those platforms. Last month, we focused on the merging and diverging sensibilities of Jewish Arabs and Arab Jews, starting with the biblical narrative of Isaac and Ishmael, which for me is a very deep and important subject. And last month, we looked at it through the lens of film and television today in Israel and in Palestine. I'm actually in Jerusalem now. I arrived here 3 weeks ago, and I'm sure you all know that conflict and complexity are all around us here now. And I want to begin by taking a moment to recognize the sadness of loss that we are seeing and feeling in Israel and Palestine now, and to hope for calm to be restored. And you know, I need to say, as those of you who follow us know, this is exactly to the point of working to understand how diverging and converging sensibilities do and can live side by side in the region. And this is what the work of those of us who are not politically engaged, but culturally engaged, see as very important here. And before I begin, I hope we can just take a moment of silence to remember the innocent lives that are being lost just now. Thank you for joining me just now in that moment. And really, let's all hope that calm and serenity can return here very soon. Talking about diverging and converging sensibilities really is a way, it's a segue to our conversation for today. Today, we're going to look at another kind of other in Israel and Palestine. Our narrative has focused mainly on Arabs and Jews, on Palestinians and Israelis. Today, rather than that, we want to talk about other groups that populate the region. Our focus notably will be on Soviet emigre residents who are here and on African refugees and others. And we want to focus on how art helps us interpret the experience of those immigrants to the region have as they come here and how they are able to communicate the complexity of that experience for the benefit of others. And it's a privilege to have this kind of conversation with Zoya Cherkassky, Soviet-born Israeli artist who came on my radar perhaps 10 years ago and who then had a seminal exhibition at the Israel Museum in 2018. And we'll talk about her experience, and we'll also talk about the amazing moment of that exhibition in the course of our conversation today. Zoya was born in Kiev in 1976. She emigrated to Israel in 1991, came to Tel Aviv in that period just prior to the collapse of the Soviet Union. And she was part of the migration that ultimately brought 1.3 million Russians to Israel. This is about 15% of the population here. It's a community that is its own kind of subculture here. And until today, it is a subculture. It's a dominant part of the culture, but it is a subculture. For Zoya, her Soviet childhood and her Israeli immigration are inextricably tied to what her life and her work has been about. Her art, in fact, is a kind of medium for illustrating and also illuminating and explicating what that experience has been about. And it's going to be a pleasure to hear Zoya talk about all of this. I've had this pleasure in the past, and I'm looking forward to it today. So Zoya began with a well-anchored Soviet upbringing. She started painting as a child. She painted all through her experience in the Soviet Union, and that is one of the anchors that formed her life when she arrived in Israel. As you might recall, in the former Soviet Union, academic training was academic training. And Zoya's early training in painting was exactly that. She came to Israel. She went to a high school for the arts and a college for the arts here in Israel. And so her training was really saturated from the beginning by this notion of art as an anchor. So Zoya, I would like you to start by talking about the way in which, for you, art became a pathway either to the mainstream here or as a way to explain the immigrant experience for the benefit of the mainstream. Tell us what that experience was about from the beginning. Tell us about the early years.
Thank you for the beautiful introduction, and thanks everybody for coming. Well, actually, like in Soviet Union, everything, like the teaching and training starts very early, and if you want to do sports, then when you are 5 years old, you are too old, you have to do it earlier. And with art, it's like a little bit later, but still, like I entered an art school in Kiev, which was the main art school for the Ukraine. And it was like very serious because like you are like, it was like 3 full days of only drawing and painting. And it was like also very serious, like you are taking somebody's place, so you have to prove that you deserve this place in this school. And actually I think that it was like quite traditional, but I must say that like the Soviet tradition of academic teaching is not like 100% academic, because there are many influences of modern art that came to Soviet Union in the early 20s, and it was like kept through the whole history of Soviet art. And when I think when people in the West try to imagine Soviet art, it's like usually quite often I see how people imagine it as 70 years of Stalin's portraits, but it's not really true. It's like there was like maybe only like 5 or 10 years of this very strict social realism, but it was pretty much flexible before and after. So, but I think that when I came to Israel when I was 14, and I think it was the stage when I was learning how to draw a skull, and I was like really good in drawing skulls. And then when I came to Israel, and like the first thing my parents were looking for was similar art school in Israel, and somebody has recommended my mom Tilmailin High School in Givatayim. And I think 1 week after we've landed, I was accepted to this school. And when I entered it, I've seen dark in my eyes, because I've seen like children of my age, like totally incapable of drawing a skull. And actually, like I think in the 90s, everything, like all the art in Israel was very concept oriented, and it was mostly talking about art, and painting or drawing was it was almost a shame to like to know how to draw academically. And I mean, quite fast I understood that like I will not learn how to draw in Israel. And actually I kept doing school exercises from my Ukrainian school that my friends used to send me, but I've discovered something else. Like I found out there's such thing as contemporary art that I didn't like, wasn't even aware of its existence before I came to Israel. I thought like Picasso is the most contemporary painter, and it was like 1991. So actually I was like very curious about it, and I was just trying to get this contemporary art experience from the school, but all my academic exercises I was not showing to my teachers in Tel Malin because I knew they will not understand it.
You know, Zoya, you just touched on so many points that I want to come back to, and particularly people generally, unless they're art historians of that period, don't know about the intersection of social realism and European avant-garde that you had in the Soviet Union, and that informed what your work would look like later. But before we go there, I want to stay with how you were connected to art from the very beginning. The first time I met you, you told me that you always knew you would be a painter because you've painted all your life. And my question there is, when you came to Israel, was embracing that conviction a passion, or was it a consolation for being taken from what was your home place and finding yourself in a new place, which was so foreign to you?
Well, I think I was lucky to enter from one art school to another art school because it was it made it much softer, because like it was sort of staying in this art bubble, and I think I didn't see the real Israel till I was 30 or something, because like until I was like 30, I was sure that everybody in Israel is subscribed to Studio magazine, which is the art magazine for in Israel that does not exist anymore. And I think I was like really disconnected from what Israel is in a way. But although I didn't have my personal experience of being called like Russian prostitute at the age of 14, but I've heard it from other places. Like there were like people around me, and like my family, cousins, like I've heard it from different places. So I think when I decided to focus on this subject, it was like I didn't have to think twice what I need to depict, because it was there.
And you know, you've also said to me before that art kept you in a kind of box. It gave you blindness in a way, but you also, I know from your biography, that it was in your early 30s that you went to Berlin, and you spent a substantial amount of time there, and it awakened you to the political world. But more important than that, it awakened you to the notion of outsiders in the mainstream and the role of being an outsider in the mainstream. You know, you started your life as a Ukrainian Jew, which made you a minority in the Soviet Union. Then you became a Soviet emigre in Israel, and you were a minority in Israel.
And non-Jewish.
And here in Israel, not Jewish. So in a way, you were an outsider, but you've always figured out ways, once that experience awakened you, to integrate. And I want you to talk about that, this notion of clearly being an outsider, but also having the sensibility of what's happening inside, and a job to do in interpreting that.
Yeah. I mean, I think because I'm like was always inside the art scene, either in school or in high school or anywhere else. I think that like I think I was feeling a bit exotic, but I did not feel like outsider in the means of like not being accepted or something like that. Like I just you know, like was feeling like I'm special, rather
I,
special than weird, you know.
I was just
And
going to ask you that. Did it make you feel empowered in a way? Did it
yes,
make
yes,
you
yeah,
might have
because I
a
like
job to do?
yeah. First of all, you know, I think like being Soviet is like it gives you strength because you know, like Soviet people, they are tough, you know, and like I mean, I was always like feeling like fine with being Soviet, and like I don't know, like somehow I was feeling like fine with it, and I only like as you said, like when I came to Berlin, it was like the first time I was like feeling totally like outsider there because uh, besides the you know the Holocaust history, like what connects me to Germany, you know, and this is not the best connection, you know. So this is actually, and also I met. An artist whose name is Avdej Toroganyan. He's an artist from Moscow, and like he did like some radical performance in the 90s, and then he had to run away from Moscow to Europe because there was like uh, issues, and he like had a great influence on me, and in the means of understanding the political context of art.
And you know what's interesting for me seeing your work is that your work becomes an intersection of what you just described, and yet still and always it's about art. It's not about politics or political agendas. It is a kind of a social reflection on everything around you, which brings all of that together and interprets it in a way that you can absorb through the imagery that you depict. And I want to talk a bit now about your painting, and I want us to look at some of your paintings and have you talk about them. As you said yourself in your training, your background was academic, but you also had access to that really great and interesting phenomenon in the Soviet Union in the first half of the 20th century, where social realism intersected with the avant-garde that was across Europe and all the way to the Soviet Union between the wars. And in Israel, you created your own kind of Barbizon school in Israel, you with several other painters. So it was about taking 19th century, moving from academic studio paintings to painting in nature out of doors, and then to coming to a kind of modernism like the early 20th century work that you've already talked about. But for you, it became a vocabulary that let you morph to caricature and satire as ways to have a perspective on everything around you. So I want us to look at some images and talk about that. Let's start with the image called Soviet, from the series of Soviet childhood that you did in the first decade of this and that you did in 2005 through 2010. Let's start with the work called A Picnic, which for me is like the Barbizon School meets Russian Stereotype.
Yeah, well, actually, this is the crescendo of the Barbizon experience, and my project, which is focusing on the Soviet, like on this, like my memories from the Soviet Union, and actually, this painting is called Déjeuner sur Grasse, like Monet's painting, and it's like. I think it's like quite easy to see my Soviet experience through even through the language, the language of I used to depict like humans or something like that. But you can also see the modernist influence on it, because the background I even stolen it from the rain, because I needed this sort of landscape, and in Israel there is no such river. So I thought, like, instead of making my life hard, I can take it from someone, because like all the modernist artists, they suffer to make our life easier.
But it's interesting because you're not copying here. And, I use these terms caricature and satire, but
Yeah,
there isn't you're not being negative in your perspective here. You're being humorous, actually.
yeah,
And even before you told me that this was Derain, it is Derain. It's the faux
yeah.
painters from those avant-garde painters from the first decade of the last century.
Yeah, because it's not a postmodernist quotation, because like postmodernism and irony, they're like, to me it's old fashioned, because like I don't use irony, I use humor, and I don't use quotation, I just take what I need.
Actually, you just said it. It's not irony, it's humor. And we're going to talk more about that. But let's look at another image, which is also from the same period, which is the painting Neve Sha'anan. And again, you are in the out of doors. Again, you're seeing this kind of revolution in the late 19th century. You're also seeing that avant-garde moment in the first decade of the 20th century in France. But this is an image on the street in Tel Aviv. And
Yeah.
clearly you used it to surface the African presence.
Yeah, actually this painting is made from observation on the street, and I think this is the biggest painting I ever done on the street, because it's like quite big. It's like 2 meters by 1.5 meters. I don't know how to translate it to American measurements. And
4 by 6
it's
feet.
big.
It's big.
It's big. And like actually I brought my studio out to the street, and this was the whole story of Barbizon, going and painting in the city. And this is like one of the most tough neighborhoods in Tel Aviv, because it's like there was improvised market on the street, like flea market, when usually like African immigrants, they used to sell things just to like useful things, like wire or things for home, like it's not antique market or something. And
here, are you looking to, in addition to being out in the open air, and in addition to absorbing the street scene in Tel Aviv, which had become by then clearly your home, clearly your base, here are you trying to show the diversity of populations that are there? Are you trying to surface another kind of other, being the African community, which is also, like the Soviet emigre community, a subset, a subculture?
like usually when you go to paint from observation, it's a hunt. You don't know what you will find. So and it's like also very stressful, because like when I go to paint in Germany, nobody's coming to talk to me. Here everybody's like, it's crazy, like people, they just come between me and the canvas and take selfies, and everybody like have their story to tell, really. Like once I used to paint on the street, and one woman come to me, she said, my daughter is also very creative. Look, she did the costume of a washing machine for Purim. And she showed me like how her daughter is like dressed like washing machine. And everybody has something like that. I was even like really surprised by the communicative power of art, because like people come and they start sharing things with you that you don't even understand, like why, like you don't understand why they decide to tell it to me, and it's like funny, but it's also very stressful, because people, they don't let you paint, they like want your attention.
Well, and it's interesting because you said before that you followed your own trajectory when artists in Israel were being conceptual, when artists in Israel were being totally non-objective in their imagery, you were otherwise. So you were, when you painted this painting, I'm sure you were the only artist of note painting out in the open air in the street. So for people
Yeah.
to encounter you was a different experience.
Of course, yes, and we've been like with this group. We were a group of 5 women, all of us from former Soviet Union, and we tried to go like everywhere we could go. We go in Israel, and we've been like in Israel, in Palestine, everywhere, and also abroad of Israel and outside of Israel. And I was like really excited because like even when I go to Africa, for example, usually when I take my camera, people are like, you know, don't like it, and they also get aggressive because they don't want it to be photographed. But when you start painting, it's like always positive experience. Everybody's like, wow, is this me, you know? And like everybody want a model. It's like really really different experience.
And what you're doing actually is making an anchor in history, because that's what artists used to do. And that isn't what
Yeah.
And again, for me, this is a signal of how you are in the culture, but you're also outside of and apart from the culture. And that creates what is a unique perspective for you.
Yeah.
You know, let's now look at a couple of the paintings from the Pravda series, which was the series that we had the privilege of exhibiting at the Israel Museum in 2018. Pravda, as we know, is the name of the official Soviet newspaper. Pravda means truth. And the question here for you, clearly, you're going to be depicting a truth that your eyes could see and understand, not from a negative perspective, but in order to talk about this notion of integration or the confusion of an effort to integrate that doesn't always succeed. Here, tell us about this painting, which really got a huge amount of attention at the time of the show at the Israel Museum.
Yeah, well, it's actually is a painting is telling like the situation of Giyur, which is conversion to just Judaism, and there was like a lot of Soviet families. They are mixed families. Like my own family is like my father is Jewish, and my mother is half Jewish, but on the wrong half. So like my mom's mother is Ukrainian, so I'm Ukrainian, and everybody is, all my children are Ukrainians, like we are Ukrainians. And I think there are like 300,000 families like that, like 300,000 non-Jews, which are like have similar story like my own. And when we came, my mom was a little bit, Zoya, maybe we go and convert because it will be better. So we went to synagogue. We went to this, how do you call it, rabbinat. And they sent us to synagogue near our house. And it was like divided into 3 groups by language. And I was the only one in my group because I was the only one who could speak Hebrew fluent. And there was one, it's not a rabbi, he was a volunteer. And he's like, and you know, he had no clue who are Soviet Jews and who are Soviet half Jews. So he tried to convince me, started convincing me against Christianity, which is not the story. No, I was not Christian. I was just nothing, you know, like I did not care about religion. And he's like, the first thing he said is like, do you know that Christ was not the son of God? He was the son of Roman soldier. And I was like, come on, like how can you say such thing? Like, who knows? And like, you know, like I was 14, so I was like arguing with him all the time. And then like it didn't work, like I quit. And like people were talking about it, like it was like a subject of discussion in many families. So they say that there is like rabbis that come to your house and check in the pot, what are you cooking? Like, I don't know if it was like real or not. I guess there was like a religious like Haredi man or woman that come and like guide you at your home, like how do you make your home kosher, and like all these things. But like my family, we didn't reach this level, but I've decided to depict it because it's like a funny moment. Like in this family that you see in the picture, the wife, she's not Jewish, and you can see it by her face features. She have blue eyes and she look Russian, and she's like they really try to follow the Jewish rules. They have this challah bread on the table and a little book with rules how to do Shabbat, and but they are not like so much like they did not learn till the end. So they cook this pork stew for Shabbat meal, and the rabbi come to check it, and probably is the first time he see this pig so close, and it's looking at him like, how do you call it, this gun with two and like I always like imagine this image as a frame from the movie, like what's gonna be next. Will he throw this pot and run away, or like what will happen, things like that. And there is another insider joke in this there is a box with Madane Mizra, which is non-kosher company that make salads, and also there is this it's called Crystal Cola, the pink drink that is like cheaper Coca-Cola for Russians and Arabs.
No, you know, there's so much imagery packed into this picture, and you described it beautifully, and it was greeted. I guess my question is, did you make this depiction in order to be humorous or in order to be cynical about what that experience is about?
I'm not cynical, you know. It's like this whole exhibition is that how do you call it, tragic comedy. It's like I think this is what the Jewish humor is. It's like laughter and tears.
Right, right. You're exactly right. And I want to take us to the next image, which is a painting called Itzik. And this painting really had a different reception from every other work in the show. And it clearly is about stereotyping.
Yeah. Well, this image, it's like so much about stereotyping that everybody got offended at me because of this painting. Like the Mizrahi Jews, they like say it's like racist against Mizrahi Jews, and the racist against Russian. And actually, it's like a moment of like sexual harassment at falafel shop. And I think that women from Soviet Union, they like have renommee of like easy to get, and I think like Russian prostitute is the like very typical stereotype on Russian woman, and I think that there is no woman that did not experience sort of sexual harassment like from men in Israel, and this is like such moment, but it's like so bad from every possible direction, because on one side there is like harassment is going on, but on the other side there is such a I would say even anti-Semitic depiction of Mizrahi Jew. So
I was going to say the depiction of the male is also stereotypical because it's a stereotype depiction of a Mizrahi Jewish man.
This is stereotypical big time, and it's and I think this painting is like the essence of Israeli racism, you know, because everything is so poisoned in this painting.
Well, that is correct, and that is actually how the press responded to this work. The show.
No, actually, there was many there was many articles written by Mizrahi Jews. I think most of them were not from the art field. There was like more activists and things like that, and like activists and sociologists and things like that. And they called me racist, but I think they just did not understand.
Well, the interesting thing is that painting became a lightning rod for the notion that we're being cynical and socially critical, that it wasn't just about humor. But this brings me to a repeated point. When you see all the image there here, when you see this image and all of the images that were in that exhibition, you have this sense of your perspective, which wants to bring humor. In the case of this image, it does go beyond that. And there was a lot written about it as a result. And each community, the Russian community objected to the depiction of a Russian woman as a loose woman. And the Mizrahi community objected to the depiction of a Mizrahi Jewish man in the way that you see in the image. And yet it was very strong and people absorbed it and understood it. And, you know, when you and I were talking in preparation for this evening, you talked about the use of cartooning. And I didn't think of your work that way before, but in your mind, it is about using cartoons, not because they're about humor, but because they're a very simple, straightforward, plain way of depiction. But how did you get obsessed with cartooning?
Well, I think that generally Soviet art is very storytelling, because the main goal of it is I would not call it propaganda, but explanation of our way of life outside, and also cartoon was it's like a very strong tool of propaganda, so it was like very popular. But and there was like magazine I used to buy, which was called Crocodile, and it was like cartoon, like only cartoons, like magazines for cartoons. There was like not so much comics in Soviet Union, but cartoons were very popular. And actually, like till now, I like this. I have books from painters from this who used to draw for this Crocodile magazine, because I think like when I was when I was looking for my way in art, it was like very important for me to bring my message in a very direct way. Like I wanted my audience to understand me well, what I'm saying. So cartoon is like very powerful tool, because it's like telling things like very straight to the face.
Well, I think that's actually the point. It is about simple and straightforward. Whether what it wants to telegraph is something that's negative or something that's positive. You know, I want to come back to the point that you always make, which is that for you, art was a path to understanding your past, and also a path to the mainstream. And in your own experience, did you see your ability to depict this kind of outsider-insider phenomenon, and the way that you understood other minority cultures in Israel? Did you see this and your treatment of it as a kind of positive thing, as an assertion of the diversity that exists here, whether or not it's understood and absorbed, or did you see it as discrimination?
Sorry, again.
Well, your treatment of all of these subjects, and just based on your own experience, when you are looking at the diversity of cultures that we have across Israel, are you doing this so as to make an assertion about the richness of that diversity, which is a positive point, or are you speaking to the notion of discrimination, you know, of not embracing?
Yes, I understood. I think both, because you know, I'm not a tourist here, so I see like all the sides of life here, which is very intense and very, like, how do you call it, full of emotions. Like everybody's very emotional about everything, and like when I like, you know, I think that there is such some sense that I have as an artist, like some social sensitivity. And when I see things, it can be even like a scene I see on the street. Like, I don't know, like a couple of days ago, I went on the street and I've seen 3 Haredi girls climbing fence. And even in such situation, you know, like it can tell so much about like what it is being a woman or a girl in a Haredi society, because it's like was a bit weird to see them how they climb fence with these long skirts, and it was obvious that they are not supposed to do it, but they are just too young to know that it's like not appropriate for them. And there's like millions of situations like that, and when I see them, I catch them. So it's like not a decision that I'm making before I go to draw, that I will be critical or I will be compassionate or I will be whatever. Like it's something that just happens, and then I take it to my studio.
You know, I think this is what's so great about you and your work, because it's not just a kind of obsession with your own subgroup, with your own identity within the Soviet emigre population. And
Yeah.
and I want to turn to another part of your life, actually. And Zoya is married to Sunny Nadi, who is a Nigerian migrant worker who emigrated to Israel, is a citizen. She met Sunny when she was actually looking for African models for paintings like the painting that you saw of the street in Tel Aviv. And of course, Nadi is part of the African subculture in Israel. It's another class of very engaged members of the broad community, but also a class of outsiders. And I want you to talk a little bit about this. And again, are you always asserting the richness of the multiplicity of cultures that make up the true Israel, or are you commenting on how those minority cultures are not absorbed?
I don't know, even the African subculture in Israel is not homogenic, because there are like different subcultures inside of it. Like there are foreign workers, like most of them are from Nigeria or Ghana, and there are refugees which are mostly Eritrean and Sudanese, and there are African Jews which are Ethiopians. So they are like very different, and some of them hate each other, you know. So it's like not that simple.
You know, we're also touching a very critical point, which is that there is no accurate stereotype of any minority culture in the country, because as you were describing about Soviet emigres who are Jews, partly Jewish, not Jewish, there are very strong differences and differentiations within each culture.
Yeah, also, you know, like they call us Russians, like they call us all Russians, but you know, some of us are from Kazakhstan and some of us are from Lithuania, which are different countries. And I mean, like it's like I was always interested in this like human zoo, you know, that I'm also feel sort of ape in it, yeah. And I mean, like I'm like naturally attracted to all these things. So like if I see a chance to learn about some group and to become like, you know, friendly with, I always use it.
Well, this is you're getting exactly to the heart of the matter, because I think that you are embracing all of these different communities, and in a funny way, making a joke of how the stereotypes are formed, because you know that none of those stereotypes is accurate. I mean, what would you say is what's the demographic of the true Israel? How diverse is this population across Israel?
Well, I think, like, you know, I haven't been in America too much to experience its diversity, but compared to places that I've been, I think this is the most crazy place. It's not like in Germany when everybody is wearing beige pants, you know.
And between us, for the benefit of those who are with us, I actually absolutely agree with you. There is an unbelievable diversity here, which many simply don't see. Their perspective is different from yours. And I think you benefit from coming from another place and looking through a different lens, which is an embracing lens. And,
yeah,
you know, coming to often in these conversations, I raise the question of depicting whatever your perspective is through a lens of honesty and accuracy, or if you're depicting in a way that makes an editorial point. Do you feel about your work that you are being an honest, that you're using your language, your cartoon language, let's say, for example, in order to give an honest and accurate depiction of what you see, or are you trying to make an editorial point?
I'm just trying to catch some sort of collective memory or collective experience, and of course it's like I cannot be objective because it's my experience, but I'm also part of this society, so I think that what is like what I see also other people see it, so I try to find the essence. It's very important for me. And I also use, like, I also publish on, like, I'm a blogger, and I publish on my Facebook and Instagram, like, usually, like, I even ask advice. I say, like, what do you think, like, which car would fit better, this or this, or like, for example, this painting Itzik that we've seen in falafel shop, there was the whole discussion about prices of falafel in 1991. People just block each other because they could not agree on prices on falafel, you know? And it's quite a lot. I use this help of the collective mind to make my paintings more exact. Or like this picnic scene, I also published it, and they say, like, you know, there is always people that say, there was no tape like this in 1972. And like I say, okay, now it's your time to say it. Like, your dad didn't have pants like this in 1972, shoot it, like, tell me.
You know, your perspective is incredibly fresh. And with the complexity that's all around us everywhere, you're delivering a good message. You know, I wanted, thinking about it, I wanted to ask, and I know the answer. You don't see yourself as a poster child for disconnected or disenfranchised cultures. You see yourself as celebrating the true diversity that's around you, not wanting to accept another story. Is that accurate?
I'm trying to.
Well, you know, you often say that your art is just about art. And what I'm saying is that it's not just about art. It really is about kind of celebrating and embracing a diversity that not everyone sees or is willing to see or is interested in seeing.
Yeah, I don't know if I said it, I think I didn't mean it, because of course my art is not only about art.
Well, good. I'm glad you recognize that, because it's quite important. You know, I wanted, before we conclude, I want to talk a bit about where your focus is today in your work, because I know you've been spending more time in Nigeria, and there you are part of a family, but you're also a stranger from outside. So it's another way of being inside and outside.
I'm just back from Nigeria, and I've been there 3 times. And this was like I, from the first time, I knew that I'm gonna make like some like painting project about Nigeria, but I needed to collect more footage and more experience. So this time was like I was really went there in knowledge that I'm gonna bring footage with me. And actually, it's like a weird experience because it's a village, it's a big village, not far from Enugu city, which is the state, which is the capital of what used to be Biafra. And like my husband, he's Biafran. and there is like not very like you don't see many white people there because there is like factories like Heineken factory and things like that. So like the white people, they are like the managers of these factories, and they don't walk on the street. They live in their compounds, and like you don't really see them, only in the shopping center. And it's like a place that you cannot come there as tourist because there is no tourism in this place. There is like nothing made for tourists, and the only way to get there is to marry a Nigerian. So it was like a very special experience because, like, you know, like there is no chance I would see it if I was not a Niger wife, and of course, like. Of course, I'm not an insider because everybody can see from 5 kilometers that I'm not a Nigerian. But it's like this is the type of things that I like being inside and outside at the same time.
So when you're there, do you feel that you're typecast? Do you feel that you're just a stereotype for a white presence in a non-white culture?
Yeah, because you know, when I walk on the street, everybody point at me and shout "Onyocha," which means white woman, and the small children come to touch my skin to see if it's not painted.
Well, I have to say that the messages that you radiate when you speak and the messages that you deliver in your work really are about understanding and accepting diversity and
Yeah.
not wanting to succumb to stereotyping, and that those are really important messages with the complexity that we have everywhere, not just in this region but worldwide. These are messages that I think are important globally, and it's really quite meaningful that your work expresses all of that. And I know that your work, we were very privileged at the Israel Museum in 2018 to do an exhibition that got a huge amount of attention. It was then shown in New York, and your work really is moving out into the world. And perhaps part of the reason is because of these messages that you are able to communicate. How do you feel about that? Is it making you, are you feeling emboldened? Are you feeling thrilled by that? Is it making you shy
Well,
or bashful in any way about your attitudes? I don't think so.
No, I feel I was privileged to have this such a massive show in the Israel Museum, and of course I was like really happy to that my work was accepted well in the States, because like I had no clue what people will think about it, because I haven't even been in the States before I came with this show, and I was like really happy to know that this human experience through painting is communicative, not only in places that I'm familiar with.
Well, I want to conclude by saying that you just need to keep telegraphing these messages because they are absolutely critical in this time. And I want to thank you for being with us. And I want to thank
you very much
to our audience today. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And for everyone, let's all just hope that a kind of calm and serenity that we deserve in this part of the world gets restored here very soon. We appreciate that you all took the time to be with us today. If you were here with us in the region, it is a very complex and challenging moment. Out in the rest of the world, you're seeing it and thinking of other things. So to let culture be a part of your day today really has a lot of meaning for us, and we thank all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.